Hi, we are here for video discussion 2. In this video discussion, we will be talking about folk singers from chapter 5 and the authenticity of their songwriting, live performance, and careers. I'm here with my father, Joe Carbonello, and I'm Matt Carbonello. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 5 different artists from chapter 5, including Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Mama and the Papas, the Byrds, and Peter, Paul, and Mary. All these artists took their own takes on folk music while straying and remaining loyal to traditional folk music, while also staying relevant to the times and the culture that was happening during late 1960s. First we'll talk about Bob Dylan. A specific song is Blowing in the Wind. Joe, do you think that was authentic, or in what ways was that song, which was originally a Pete Seeger song, was it authentic in terms of the content was talking about war and obviously big controversies that were going on during that time, including Vietnam. We know that Bob Dylan was in many ways a traditional folk singer, and he had a lot of respect for Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, but later would stray away in terms of sound preference and in many ways content, and would kind of lash out at people who would take disagreements with him, and that he should have stayed in traditional folk. And he would, he would write songs specifically targeted at them, often in disagreement and kind of disgust. But in Blowing in the Wind, I think that was authentic, very much in terms of motive and lyrical content. It wasn't necessarily authentic in terms of him writing a song, because it was a cover song, but his take on it was somewhat authentic, because it was it did sound very much like a traditional, like acoustic guitar, stripped down folk song, unlike some of the stuff you would get in later with the Grateful Dead and full band and the band, more the birth of folk rock. But other songs like Times They Are Changing, that was very authentic because he wrote it. It was authentic because it was relevant and culturally moving, and the sound itself was still kind of within the realm of traditional folk and not hillbilly music, but folk. So that's, those terms all apply. What did you think, Dad?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would agree with most of what you're saying, Matt, in terms of authenticity. Bob Dylan, he wrote so many songs, and wrote so many songs of the changing times and problems, including civil rights, and including peacetime, wartime, and just so many problems of society. I think even if he took a song and sang about it that wasn't his, because he was such a prolific songwriter and somebody that spoke out, through his art, I don't think there's any. Well, maybe there's somebody who would argue that he wasn't authentic, but to me, having lived through that time, I can't think of anybody that was more authentic in terms of his songwriting and his ability to convey, messages about, problems of society. I thought he was, especially back then where there really wasn't any kinds of forums like the internet or other kinds of. There was only so many radio stations, and there was only so many different formats. I think Bob Dylan expressed so many thoughts of, like so many of these other artists, so many thoughts and ideas of the time. So, in my opinion, authentic.
Check.
So I can hit up the next one, right, Matt? My turn.
Sure, you can talk about Joan.
Joan Baez. Joan Baez. Authentic or not authentic? I think she didn't necessarily write some of her songs, but I think she made them her own, which one could argue makes her authentic. She certainly was one of the few woman singers of her generation by herself, for that matter, and she was out there by herself, and just a powerful voice and also a powerful personality. A song like "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down," even though that wasn't written by her, I believe it was written by the band. I think it's hard to argue that she interpreted that song strongly about civil rights, in my opinion, and made it her own. So I'm going to give her a thumbs up for being authentic. How about you, Matt?
I would agree. There's a lot of things I like about Joan. I thought I like her style, and she obviously had a love for some of the songs that were coming out of this like folk rock community, and she obviously was able to assimilate and become friends and respected with people like Bob Dylan and Donovan and the band. And I like her song selection, and I think because she was a woman, when you listen to it, you kind of get a different take on it. And she covered a lot of great Dylan songs that weren't necessarily super promoted in the on the radio and things like that. For example, Drifter's Escape. It kind of sounds like maybe something that George Harrison would do. She put a lot of Eastern sounds in there, and also Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, which is a little bit more popular and known, but she did her own take, and she obviously had a love for stories and this kind of music, and took her own take. And if Bob Dylan was remaining loyal to old folk like Woody Guthrie and people like that, Joan Baez was remaining loyal to Bob Dylan, so she obviously had a lot of respect. I think her content was really authentic in terms of she talked about war and peace, and I think peace was really hot because there's a lot of death going on.
Okay.
But now we'll talk about the Mamas and the Papas. California Dreaming, it's a great song. I feel like because they were working with the Wrecking Crew, they had more of an authentic background and just like the musicality over the folk lyrical sense. So they were musicians, but the California Dreamin' stopped into a church, and I pretend to pray. A lot of hot issues that religion will always be relevant. So I think this song is very authentic, and it's kind of a classic. And they kind of took a darker take on what folk music could be in terms of harmonies and texture, and they really made it their own. So I say they're authentic, really authentic.
Yeah, Matt, I would agree with you. I'm not positive that the Wrecking Crew worked with them, but maybe they did. I'm not positive. Hopefully you won't.
They did.
They did, okay.
I remember from the documentary
okay.
that you showed me. So,
but I do know for a fact, in my opinion, that but I definitely think, in my opinion, having again, listened to them throughout that era, they were incredibly unique in terms of their beautiful harmonies, and really one of a kind. And their songs like California Dreamin' certainly was just so it was just captivating when you listen to those songs, because they were like anything else on the air at the time. And from that perspective, I'd say that's a whopping authentic thumbs up.
All right, what'd you think about the Byrds?
Well, the Byrds, I mean, again, I think they're kind of like maybe Joan Baez to some degree, in that they didn't write like a song like to every something turn turn turn. I believe that was written by Peter Seeger, but it was during that era where there was just so much civil rights upheaval, so many problems going on with with Vietnam and other issues of the day, that I think it really captured the emotions and the imagination, I think, of so many people listening to him, because it almost, as I recall, it almost kind of gave you hope, to every season, turn, turn, turn. It was like, even though you're going through a bad spell, okay, good news is on the horizon. And I just think it was a perfect song for that generation. Certainly when I was a young man, during that era, I thought it was authentic in that it was very real. It captured the essence of what was going on during that time. Perhaps Peter Seeger, his music was also very authentic, but I think certainly the Byrds popularized that song, in my opinion, more so than Peter Seeger did. And again, it was just so poignant and so apropos for that era, that I think absolutely a resounding thumbs up for authenticity.
Okay. Well, so we've said everyone's authentic, so I'm gonna argue this one is a little less authentic, because there are like a lot of songs that write. There are a lot of people that write their own songs, and there's obviously something to be said for the power of a cover. Like if you listen to The Who, "Summertime Blues," I mean that's a totally different song. Even Bob Dylan did that. And this song obviously had staying power, but I listened to it, and I don't think that I think it was kind of similar to a lot of other stuff that was happening at the time, and it didn't necessarily stand out to me as something that I thought it was almost completely derived from the past version, just kind of rock and rolled up, and not shallow, but maybe a little less like forward as something like a Bob Dylan or Peter, Paul and Mary.
Okay. Well, while
It
we
was
have
still
this,
authentic. It was still.
while we have this discussion, I just want to convey one fact. I am your father.
Yeah.
Okay. And typically when I speak, I'm usually
You're right.
right.
Wasn't David Crosby in the Byrds?
I know. No, you make an excellent point, Matt, and I think we can agree to disagree on that.
Okay, well, we'll move on.
All right.
Moving on.
And you can call me Dad instead of Joe.
Well, I did. Well, only once, and then I corrected myself.
Okay, well done.
Just once. All right. Peter, Paul, and Mary. So they also did "Blowing in the Wind." Embracing traditional folk communities and heritage. Peter, Paul, and Mary never fully broke away from folk music like Bob Dylan did, even though they did the same song. I think Bob Dylan was looking for a more maybe original creative outlet, but Peter, Paul, and Mary is absolutely authentic in style and in motive and content. I think the way they pick songs and highlight, issues and talk in traditional folk manner of telling a story and portraying a message, I think it comes across as really genuine. And even though they're doing other people's songs, and they did write some of their own songs, I think it comes across as new and innovative and has staying power. And I think the harmony thing is very cultural, in that when you get a bunch of people together with acoustic guitars and just gathering around a microphone in a country setting, I think it has almost like a thematic feeling of goodness and country heritage, like I said before. So I think it's, in my opinion, it's very authentic.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Matt. I mean, even though they didn't write that song, The Answer, My Friend Is Blowing in the Wind, they did. You said, I think, a very important word. They chose that song, and they sung that song with incredible passion. I think it was all done by design, to speak out at like revitals or not revival, not the right word, revivals, and they actually tried to be part of that movement, to be very outspoken.
It was almost like quietly outspoken.
Yeah, and in some cases not quietly outspoken. I mean, they were very outspoken, and they would talk those issues. And if you ever watch some of the old footage of them singing that song, it was clear that they were very passionate about the issues of the time, and wanted to sing, loudly and strongly about it. So they were very, like I said, passionate about the movement, and I think, based upon that passion and the belief that the answer, My Friend Blowing in the Wind song, from what I've read, is really about the war, and how to stop the war, and thinking about the war and reflecting on it. I think it was chosen by them, and they felt very strongly about it, and for that reason, resounding thumbs up for authenticity. Okay.
Yeah, so let's review.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh.
We're not done.
Oh, okay. No,
I'll take this one here.
The Monkees first.
Okay. All right, let's take the Monkees.
Yeah.
I think the Monkees are in some cases, because of the originality of what was going on during the early 60s. I mean, their music, was mainly, in my opinion, and when you listen to some of the interviews by Mickey Dolenz, was basically about entertainment. They thought of themselves as actors, or he did anyway. But at the same time, it was very authentic in that, they put some pretty cool harmonies together for their television show,
Right.
And from that perspective, it was authentic, and they became incredibly popular, So although I don't think a lot of their songs were as about public issues, but it was pop, but it was authentic pop.
Right.
Even though that one for sure was done a lot by the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, you're going through a different medium at that point. I mean, you're designed for TV. I mean, plenty of people have publishers and recording artists that kind of dictate what goes on. I mean, I feel like the Monkees could get a bad rap because, well, you didn't write the music. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of about the end product, and if people enjoyed it, then it's authentic. I mean, even the Doors, the Doors were more of a thematical or theatrical, band, and they obviously had talent, but a lot of people got really into them just because of the themes and how they performed and acted on stage. I mean, the process that goes into it. I mean, the guys from the Monkees will never be compared to Jimmy Page, but the TV show came together, and it obviously was moving, and they accomplished the goal, so it's authentic, I think.
I agree. I think what they did was different, and I thought they were good at what they did.
Yeah.
I thought they actually had very nice voices and harmonized well. And Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork could actually play musical instruments.
Yeah.
So, were they authentic? I think so, and I don't think they tried to pass as anything more than what they were.
Right.
And yet, ironically, I think some of their songs, like "I'm a Believer," were incredible hits.
It's a good song.
It's a great song. "Stepping Stone," another great song.
Another great song. They didn't write it, but it doesn't really matter.
It's terrific.
Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel. I think they're probably the most authentic one on this list besides Bob Dylan.
I would agree.
I think they're just terrific songwriters. Sound of Silence. right? You know, talks about speaking out and protesting, people quietly waiting the government to change and not speaking out about their issues. I mean, that doesn't have to go, or that goes way beyond, you know, protesting. I mean, people just, you know, not responding to, you know, bad situations, and you know, what intercedes those things is kind of up to the interpretation of the listener at that point. But Simon and Garfunkel, I think they're super authentic in that they're great songwriters. I mean, they wrote songs that really they're classic. They transcend time. They're timeless. Kind of the whole like folklore, like the harmony thing really works. Like I said, I think that's a real cultural thing. But they also kind of, you know, they took it to many styles, many genres. They expanded it and kept the whole thing interesting from song to song, so it doesn't get old. I mean, if you listen to Mrs. Robinson, I mean, they talk about, you know, Jesus. They talk about Joe DiMaggio. They talk about the changing times. I think a lot of people, Bob Dylan, they'll talk about homelessness. You know,
Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel. Well, I'm trying to. Being authentic comes from roots.
Yeah, I would agree. Simon and Garfunkel are probably right up there with Bob Dylan in terms of being, you know, just arguably, you know, totally authentic. You know, resounding authenticity. You know, that song that Matt we were just talking to, Sound of Silence. You know, I think back in the '60s, you know, there were a lot of people that were very, very conservative, and basically, you know, people when I was young, there were a lot of older people that basically believed everything the government would say and do, and anything that was over the evening news, believe, you know, anything and interpret the way the media wanted the message to be conveyed. And in many cases, people were outraged and upset. But the Sound of Silence, you know, in my opinion, was a great deal about people suffering in silence, you know, because they didn't have, you know, the kind of forums that we have today to speak out about injustice, you know. And even when they said, you know, the prophets are written on subway walls, you know, about the graffiti, you know. And in many cases, that's what people did because it was a way to express themselves. And I think, as I said earlier with Bob Dylan, you know, they were the sound of you know, they were trying to speak out for the people that suffered in silence, that wanted to say something, but didn't have, like I said, the medium like we have today, the internet and, you know, all kinds of things like Facebook and all kinds of ways to express our opinions, like we did back then. Things were just so suppressed. And I think people suffered in silence, and I think that's what the song's about. And they've had many other songs that we could argue all day long about that were genuinely authentic. That's what we have for today, right?
Yeah.
About, you know, some of the artists back. We could go on and on and talk about a number of other artists, but
yeah,
we covered quite a few, I think.
Yeah.
We gave our opinions, and
thank you.
Thank you.